When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
This is the Weekend Check-In from the Modern Taoist with Kip Man. Join the absolutely free Modern Taoist community on Patreon at patreon.com/themoderntaoist. And now, Kip Man.
Well, hello and welcome. Let's turn the music down a little bit. Hello and welcome to the Weekend Check-In of the Modern Taoist. My name is Kip Man. And hopefully you're getting ready for the weekend and let it be what it is going to be. Got a couple of questions that popped up that don't really warrant a whole episode, but I think it is worth our time if I answer them. Now, I'm not going to answer the specific questions because both of them went into two different directions, but the gist of the question both times began with the question about whether your life requires organization in order to be a more productive person or a better Taoist, which I'm not a fan of better or worse Taoists, but as far as using that terminology, but the reason that came up is because the world is built on this idea that your life needs better organization, right? More systems and better categories and the right planning and a better app and the right routine and the right method of sorting through everything from your inbox to your wardrobe. And it's because there's this promise underneath all of that. And this promise is consistently put into your ears, and it is seductive because it says that once everything is in order, life will finally feel manageable. Your anxiety will reduce. The sense of being behind will be gone. You will feel, and what's the word? The phrase, you will feel in control. And therefore, we organize. We build systems. We refine systems. Then we build systems for managing the other systems. And then we color code and time block and batch process and optimize. And many of them, these systems, don't do anything. Most people find out, if they're honest, that the feeling of control of the organization or that it was supposed to produce is never within reach. There's always one more area that needs to be sorted out. One more friction point that needs a system. And so the attempt to be organized stays perpetually in progress. Always, almost achieved. Never quite arrived. Taoism looks at the entire thing with, honestly, a bit of amusement. And it's not because organization is evil or systems are worthless, and that's not where I'm going with this. It's because the compulsion to organize, the belief that your life should be fully ordered before it can be fully lived, is one of the clearest examples of what Lao Tzu was talking about when he was talking about forcing. And forcing in Taoist thought is almost always the problem. rather than the solution. So consider for a second what actually happens when a person becomes seriously committed to organizing their life. In the beginning, there is genuine relief. Things that were scattered get gathered. Decisions that were being remade daily get settled into routines. There is a real and legitimate benefit to reducing the number of frictions that accumulate into a general sense of chaos. I get that. But watch what happens next. The system, once established, then needs what? Maintenance, updating, refining, protecting. Deviations from the system start to produce anxiety. And then suddenly the day that doesn't follow the routine feels like a failure, rather than just a different kind of day. And spontaneity becomes a threat. An unplanned afternoon, an unexpected conversation, something that arrives without being scheduled starts to feel like disorder, when in reality it is simply life. Without the person necessarily noticing when it happened, the system that was supposed to serve has become the one thing that is causing chaos. The tail begins wagging the dog. The structure that was meant to create freedom has become its own kind of prison. Lao Tzu wrote very extensively about that kind of a pattern. Of course, he wasn't talking about modern productivity or anything that we deal with, in our lives right now. What he was talking about, it was the language of governance and nature and water and wood and the behavior of things that are allowed to follow their own nature. The Tao Te Ching's 32nd chapter, in fact, notes that once things are divided and named and categorized, it is time to know when to stop. Because the naming and dividing taken too far becomes the new source of anxiety rather than the resolution. The organized life taken too far becomes the source of anxiety. Right? The perfect example of this is, I knew a woman one time, and she was attempting to become a minimalist, which, you know how I feel about labels, but she was attempting to become a minimalist. And in this attempt, she decided that she was going to only own 100 things. And I watched this woman get a gift for her birthday and go into her home and decide which thing she was going to throw away, since she now had 101 things. And her anxiety over which of her 101 things was going to get thrown away so that she could receive a birthday gift was something to behold. The deeper issue with the compulsion to organize is what it says about the relationship that we have with uncertainty. Because underneath every aggressive organization project is the same thing: the refusal to tolerate the feeling of not being in control, the belief that the environment can be sufficiently ordered, the inner experience will follow, and the external structure will then produce internal peace. It rarely does. And Taoism has always known why. The inner experience does not take its cues from a filing system. The anxiety that drives organization does not dissolve when the organization is complete, because the anxiety was never about disorder in the first place. It was about the fundamental uncontrollability of life. And that, for many people, is hard to tolerate. No system, however elegant, will ever resolve that fact that life is uncontrollable. The Tao moves as it moves on a schedule no one approves of and in directions nobody predicts. What Taoism proposes instead is not chaos, and it's not over-organization. This is the misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up. Wu Wei, the central Taoist principle of non-forcing, is not an instruction to become disorganized or to ignore disorganization or to be indifferent to the practical elements of a functioning life. That's not what it's about. It's something considerably more nuanced. It is the recognition that there is a difference between the structure that arises naturally from genuine need and the structure that is imposed from the outside by anxiety pretending to be productivity. Natural structure is light. It does what it needs to do and no more. It holds the things that genuinely need to be held and leaves everything else free to move. Anxious structure is heavy. It tries to account for everything, control every variable, eliminate every possible source of surprise, and you simply can't do that. The rigid tree that refuses to move will snap eventually. Bamboo bends in the storm and survives. This is Taoist imagery on purpose. It is meant to show you that if you can move and change, you will thrive. The person who has built their sense of stability entirely on the maintenance of systems is the rigid tree. And the genuine disruption that occurs, any disruption that occurs, illness, loss, unexpected demands, anything that blows the routine apart, produces not just practical inconvenience, but something that becomes closer to crisis. Because the order was not practical, it had become existential, right? You see? It was the thing standing between them and the feeling of things being out of control. So they made this system of order. And when that goes haywire, then everything else goes with it. So the correction in this is not to abandon structure. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying being organized is inherently evil. The correction is to examine honestly which of your structures are serving your life and which ones are you serving? Which ones are you spending more time maintaining than their value? Take any system, routine, organizational habit in your life and say directly, does this make genuine space for what actually matters? Or has this become the thing I maintain instead of living? Is this structure light enough to bend when it requires bending? Keep what works. Release what has become its own obligation. A routine that genuinely serves your energy is worth keeping. A routine that you maintain primarily because deviating from it will make you anxious is worth questioning. So this weekend, let something be unorganized. Not everything. Just one area where you would normally impose forced order. Leave it. Let an afternoon be unscheduled. Let Saturday have no agenda. Let something sit in its natural state and notice what actually happens. Notice whether the world around you deteriorates or whether, in the absence of over-managing, something more interesting shows up. This weekend, put that planner down for a day. Not as a statement, but just long enough to remember that you existed before the system did. And that there is a self underneath that, still functional, still capable of knowing what the next right thing is without consulting your color-coded grid to find out. The organized life is not your enemy. That's not what I'm saying. But the belief that is required, that life cannot be trusted without being organized, that you cannot be trusted, you need to examine that part. Because Taoism has always suggested that the nature underneath organization is not the problem. It is, in fact, the one thing that was not broken and never needed fixing. Let a little of that show through this weekend and see what happens. If this weekend check-in landed with you somewhere useful, follow the show so you don't miss the full episodes on Tuesdays. And if you know someone whose life has disappeared inside their own systems, send this to them and say, hey, maybe you ought to listen to this one. And thanks for being here for The Modern Taoist.
Thanks for joining this weekend check-in from The Modern Taoist with Kip Man. Like, follow, and subscribe on this platform for new episodes every Tuesday. And join the free Patreon community at patreon.com/themoderntaoist or visit us online at daoananda.com.